Hello, folks. Welcome to another edition of the Dr. Mark Foster Show. I want to begin by apologizing. I do have a slight cold today, so if I do occasionally cough or clear my throat, you'll understand. Today's program will be on a subject that I have referred to as the Great Unraveling. It's a term I coined, but I've since noticed that other people have used the term as well. By it, I mean the unraveling of the present-day world order in preparation for the gradual unfoldment of a new one. The New World Order, a world order of peace, of true globalization, not the kind of globalization that exists in the world today, of genuine fellowship and love and harmony, the flowering of the human race, the creation of a new race of men and women, is within our reach right now, I think. And the process of this great unraveling, which has been going on for a long time now, is, I feel, reaching a point of crescendo, and I think we will very soon be seeing some rather earth-shaking events in the world. This program will include a great deal of reading, and I also apologize for that, aside from my cold. I don't really feel as though I could express the thoughts that I have as well as I could by actually reading from the primary sources of my religion, the Baha'i faith. So that's what I will do, and so I will begin by reading a passage. This is from Shoghi Effendi's book, The Promised Day Has Come. In this section, Shoghi Effendi quotes the prophet founder of the Baha'i faith, Baha'u'llah. The time for the destruction of the world and its people, Baha'u'llah's prophetic pen has proclaimed, hath arrived. The hour is approaching, he specifically affirms, when the most great convulsion will have appeared. The promised day is come, the day when tormenting trials will have surged above your heads and beneath your feet, saying, Taste ye what your hands have wrought. Soon shall the blasts of his chastisement beat upon you, and the dust of hell enshroud you. And when the appointed hour is come, there shall suddenly appear that which shall cause the limbs of mankind to quake. I wondered for a while what was meant by the term destruction of the world and its people. Did that, for instance, refer to the destruction of everyone, to the complete annihilation of the human race? Well, no. Shoghi Effendi, the guardian of the Baha'i faith, has very clearly said that that will not happen, that there will be a new world order, that God will not allow all of humanity to be destroyed, so I don't think that we need to be concerned about that. Rather, I think that destroying the world has a more subtle definition. Here is how Baha'u'llah defined the world. This is in Gleanings from the Writings of Baha'u'llah, once again, page 276. Know ye that by the world is meant your unawareness of him who is your maker, and your absorption in aught else but him. And to qualify what I said before, this is from a letter written on behalf of Shoghi Effendi to an individual Baha'i. He, referring to Shoghi Effendi, does not think God will permit man to annihilate himself. Too much evolution is behind him, and too much before him for that. So, We know that, and we know that from a Baha'i perspective, that the present-day world order is in the process of being wrapped up. And we also know, from a Baha'i perspective, that in order for that to happen, that there will be a certain amount of suffering. What the precise nature of that suffering will be is in God's own plan, and we might be able to guess at it, and I will later in this program attempt to do so, but ultimately we really don't know. It's something that God alone knows. And but here is another passage. This is again from Shoghi Effendi, and in this case, what he's doing is he is quoting from an Islamic hadith. The hadith are the traditions, an Islamic tradition, in other words, that make up a supplementary body of resources in the religion of Islam. Not a part of the Quran, but it's one of the other bodies of sources that Muslims consult. This is Shoghi Effendi, once again, World Order Baha'u'llah. And again, he is quoting from an Islamic tradition in this quotation. But he begins saying, every follower of the persecuted faith of Baha'u'llah recognized evidences of the directing hand of the departed founder of his religion, who, from the invisible realm, was unloosing a flood of well-deserved calamities upon a rebellious religion. He continues, the text of certain Mohammedan traditions, the authenticity of which Muslims themselves recognize, and which have been extensively quoted by eminent Oriental Baha'i scholars and authors, will serve to corroborate the argument and illustrate the theme I have attempted to expound. Here is the first quotation. In the latter days, a grievous calamity shall befall my people at the hands of their ruler, a calamity such as no man ever heard to surpass it. So fierce will it be that none can find a shelter. God will then send down one of my descendants, one sprung from my family, who will fill the earth with justice and equity, even as it hath been filled with injustice and tyranny. That's the end of the first quote. Another one. A day shall be witnessed by my people, whereon there will have remained of Islam naught but a name, and of the Quran naught but a mere appearance. The doctors of that age shall be the most evil the world hath ever seen. Mischief hath proceeded from them, and on them will it recoil. And another quotation. At that hour his malediction shall descend upon you, and your curse shall afflict you, and your religion shall remain an empty word on your tongues. And when these signs appear amongst you, anticipate the day when the red-hot wind will have swept over you, or the day when ye will have been disfigured, or when stones will have rained upon you. That's the end of the quotation. My own thoughts, especially that last hadith or tradition, is, I think, significant. My own subjective interpretation of it, my own personal understanding, is that it appears to be referring either to some type of nuclear exchange, or perhaps to comets, meteors, other types of celestial objects hitting the earth. However, the fact that the term red-hot wind is used would appear to me to be a reference to something like nuclear fallout, perhaps, although I don't know. That's just my own speculation. Now, Shoghi Effendi apparently anticipated that given the dire circumstances which surrounded a very rapidly intensifying Cold War, coupled with the fact that the United States was going through a period of tremendous racism, that in light of those circumstances, the Soviet Union would bomb cities in the United States. However, the key phrase that he used, I think, in the following passage that I will read is, "if allowed to drift." So here is the quotation. "Pervading all departments of life, an evil which the nation, and indeed all those within the capitalist system, though to a lesser degree, share with that state and its satellites, regarded as the sworn enemies of that system, is the crass materialism which lays excessive and ever-increasing emphasis on material well-being, forgetful of those things of the spirit on which alone a sure and stable foundation can be laid for human society. No less serious is the stress and strain imposed on the fabric of American society through the fundamental and persistent neglect by the governed and governors alike of the supreme, the inescapable, and urgent duty so repeatedly and graphically represented and stressed by Abdu'l-Baha in his arraignment of the basic weaknesses of the social fabric of the nation, of remedying, while there is yet time, through a revolutionary change in the concept and attitude of the average white American toward his Negro fellow citizen, a situation which, if allowed to drift, will, in the words of Abdu'l-Baha, cause the streets of American cities to run with blood, aggravating thereby the havoc which the fearful weapons of destruction, raining from the air, and amassed by a ruthless, a vigilant, a powerful and inveterate enemy, will wreak upon those same cities. So it appears to me, from that passage, that Shoghi Effendi was anticipating the possibility that the Soviet Union would bomb the most racist cities in the American nation. But again, he used the term, "if allowed to drift." Well, so what happened? Well, I think one major thing. In spite of the fact that the 1960s in particular were a very turbulent period in the United States as far as race relations go, the rise of the civil rights movement, the struggle for racial equity and racial equality in the United States, challenging the system of white power, unfortunately, which had existed for a long time and had dominated the United States. In light of that, the fact that that on some level the United States responded positively to that, rather than continuing to oppress African Americans, the United States chose to go down a different path. And of course, we see the fruits of that in the fact that the United States elected its first African American president, Barack Obama, and perhaps even earlier had Secretary of State Colin Powell, former General Colin Powell, have run for president. Many observers have speculated that he too might have won the presidency. So although the situation of race relations in the United States is far from perfect, there are still a lot of deep-seated problems. We did go down a different path. And so I think that, in other words, fate or predestination is not necessarily fixed. Here are two quotations on that subject. The first is from Baha'u'llah, and the second is from his son, Abdu'l-Baha. First, Baha'u'llah wrote, this is in Gleanings from the Writings of Baha'u'llah: "Know thou, O fruit of my tree, that the decrees of the sovereign ordainer, as related to fate and predestination, are of two kinds. Both are to be obeyed and accepted. The one is irrevocable, the other is, as termed by men, impending. To the former, all must unreservedly submit, inasmuch as it is fixed and settled. God, however, is able to alter or repeal it. As the harm that must result from such a change, will be greater than if the decree had remained unaltered, all therefore should willingly acquiesce in what God hath willed, and confidently abide by the same. The decree that is impending, however, is such that prayer and entreaty can succeed in averting it. And here is the second passage from Abdu'l-Baha, I think very similar. Fate is of two kinds. One is decreed, and the other is conditional or impending. The decreed fate is that which cannot change or be altered, and conditional fate is that which may occur. So, for this lamp, the decreed fate is that the oil burns and will be consumed. Therefore, its eventual extinction is a decree which it is impossible to alter or change because it is a decreed fate. In the same way, in the body of man, a power of life has been created, and as soon as it is destroyed and ended, the body will certainly be decomposed. So when the oil in this lamp is burnt and finished, the lamp will undoubtedly become extinguished. But conditional fate may be likened to this. While there is still oil, a violent wind blows on the lamp, which extinguishes it. This is a conditional fate. It is wise to avoid it, to protect oneself from it, to be cautious and circumspect. But the decreed fate, which is like the finishing of the oil in the lamp, cannot be altered, changed, nor delayed. It must happen. It is inevitable that the lamp will become extinguished. So again, I think that the prediction of the fearful weapons of destruction raining apparently from the former Soviet Union on the United States was an example of a conditional fate. It wasn't decreed or ordained, and as we see, because of various circumstances, it did not happen. So the civil rights movement, from that perspective, was reasonably successful. Now, here's what I wrote further. I'm actually quoting from a book that I wrote, which is called Unitive Socialism. The URL is unitive, that's UNITIVE, .Bahaifaith, BAHAIFAITH, .info, unitive.bahaifaith.info. And here's what I wrote in this book. Each of us occupies a front row seat to one of the greatest dramas in human history, the great unraveling of a global economic and political order. Corporate capitalism, which was once widely imagined to have defeated Soviet communism in the Cold War, might, as some now fear, be on the verge of collapse. Shattering all illusions, the emperor, a marauding economic system born from human greed, while disguised as a profit motive, has had no clothes. Revolutions, uprisings, political repression, and climate change are among its legacies of moral contradiction. Shoghi Effendi condemned the cancerous growth of economic materialism in that he included both communism and the so-called free market or capitalist system. The term capitalism, a term that was originally coined by Karl Marx. And I'll read a passage by Shoghi Effendi on this. It's from the book, Citadel of Faith. Pervading all departments of life, an evil which the nation, and indeed all those within the capitalist system, though to a lesser degree, share with that state and its satellites, regarded as the sworn enemies of that system, is the crass materialism which lays excessive and ever-increasing emphasis on material well-being, forgetful of those things of the spirit on which alone a sure and stable foundation can be laid for human society. It is the same cancerous materialism, born originally in Europe, carried to excess in the North American continent, contaminating the Asiatic peoples and nations, spreading its ominous tentacles to the borders of Africa, and now invading its very heart, which Baha'u'llah in unequivocal and emphatic language denounced in his writings, comparing it to a devouring flame, and regarding it as the chief factor in precipitating the dire ordeals and world-shaking crises that must necessarily involve the burning of cities and the spread of terror and consternation in the hearts of men. Indeed, a foretaste of the devastation which this consuming fire will wreak upon the world, and with which it will lay waste the cities of the nations participating in this tragic, world-engulfing contest, has been afforded by the last World War, marking the second stage in the global havoc which humanity, forgetful of its God, and heedless of the clear warnings uttered by his appointed messenger for this day, must, alas, inevitably experience. It is the same pervasive, pernicious materialism against which the voice of the center of Baha'u'llah's covenant was raised, with pathetic persistence, from platform and pulpit, in his addresses to the heedless multitudes which, on the morrow of his fateful visit to both Europe and America, found themselves suddenly swept into the vortex of a tempest which, in its range and severity, was unsurpassed in the world's history. So, it appears to me as though he was referring to the First and Second World Wars. He then anticipated that there would be a third and additional stage for that, and that would be much greater and much more severe. Well, we have not seen it yet. We, of course, really don't know exactly precisely what that is going to be. However, Shoghi Effendi did apparently anticipate that it would be very dire, and that many places would simply be laid waste. Okay, now fast forward to 1985. By this time, the Soviet Union had ended. The Cold War, in effect, was over. By now, there is no more communist bloc per se. There are still some countries which are kind of, I guess you could say, residues of that era, like North Korea and to some extent Cuba. But for the most part, the age in which there were these large communist empires is over. Russia is now basically a market economy, as are the majority of the other states that made up the former Soviet Union and its satellites. China is something like a market economy. So in 1985, the House of Justice addressed the present situation, and focused more on capitalism than he did on state socialism. But here's what he wrote. Here's what the House of Justice wrote. In its religion's place, they, referring to increasing numbers of people, have turned either to the hedonistic pursuit of material satisfactions or to the following of man-made ideologies designed to rescue society from the evident evils under which it groans. All too many of these ideologies, alas, instead of embracing the concept of the oneness of mankind and promoting the increase of concord among different peoples, have tended to deify the state, to subordinate the rest of mankind to one nation, race, or class, to attempt to suppress all discussion and interchange of ideas, or to callously abandon starving millions to the operations of a market system that all too clearly is aggravating the plight of the majority of mankind while enabling small sections to live in a condition of affluence scarcely dreamed of by our forebears. The time has come when those who preach the dogmas of materialism, whether of the East or the West, whether of capitalism or socialism, must give account of the moral stewardship they have presumed to exercise. Why is the vast majority of the world's peoples sinking ever deeper into hunger and wretchedness, when wealth on a scale undreamed of by the pharaohs, the Caesars, or even the imperialist powers of the 19th century is at the disposal of the present arbiters of human affairs? And of course, here we are in 2013, decades later, and I would say that the statement that was made by the House of Justice in 1985 is certainly more true now than it was back then. What I've noticed is that many people, especially online, who identify themselves with the libertarian movement or talk about freedom and liberty and things along that line, that they are really concerned about losing their liberties, whatever they are, whether it's freedom to have guns, freedom of religion, freedom of speech, freedom of assembly. They feel as though the government is becoming intrusive, and the fact that we're living in a surveillance society. Well, I understand the fact that some people are concerned about that. I don't share those concerns particularly, but I understand them. Certainly, surveillance is a result of globalization. We have experienced premature globalization, I think. We are not really ready for globalization, and yet here we are. Technologically, we are globalized. Through social networking, I can post a tweet, or I can post a status message on Facebook, and people across the world can read it instantly. That fact alone has brought together people who are very different, with very different cultures, secular countries, more secular countries like the U.S. and most of Europe, more traditional countries like many of the countries in parts of Asia and North Africa. All of those countries, pardon me again, I do have that cold. All of those countries have now been brought face to face and are dealing with each other as if we're next door neighbors. Well, that's very, very dangerous. So the fact that there is more surveillance is understandable. The fact that there is more warmongering in the context of the present world order, again, is understandable. It's not good. It's not a nice thing. It would be much better if we would give that up and, I think, follow the recommendations of Baha'u'llah, the divine physician, his prescription for humanity. But the world hasn't done that. And so in the context of the great unraveling that the world is experiencing, the surveillance society certainly makes a certain degree of sense. What I would say is that far more dangerous than tyranny is anarchy. Syria, for example, was arguably a tyrannical country. However, if I were given a choice between going to Syria in the days before the revolution, when the al-Assad regime was fully in control of that country, versus going to that country right now, I think the choice would be obvious. I would have chosen to go there a few years ago. I think most people would, unless they're planning on going there to fight in the revolution. Tyranny, while not a desirable condition, at least establishes some level of stability in society, whereas in a state of anarchy, like Syria is experiencing right now, there is no stability at all, and people are terrified, and people can't get their basic necessities met. So I think that the real danger of this early part of the 21st century is not tyranny. It is anarchy. And it seems to me that the world is drifting closer and closer and closer to that. In other words, governments around the world are panicking. That's why there is so much surveillance. Surveillance is a response to global anarchy. Things have gone out of control, in a sense. There's a tremendous amount of what we call in sociology social disorganization, a lack of connectedness, a lack of unity. What critical realist Roy Bhaskar refers to as demi-reality or dualism, where basically you have difference without unity. Unity in difference is simple duality, but difference without unity is dualism or demi-reality. And without the cosmic envelope or co-presence, which is non-duality, that's what happens. Duality degenerates into dualism or demi-reality, disunity. And such is the state of the world as it is right now. We are living in a world of demi-reality. And so the responses of countries, including, again, surveillance and other things that countries are doing right now, makes a great deal of sense. I, for one, am very grateful that I do not have to listen to the daily intelligence briefs that the President of the United States does. I would assume that, given the state of the world right now, that they are pretty terrifying. So I think rather than criticize the behaviors of various governments, one should try to understand them, to recognize that their behaviors are in a sense rational in the context of a really socially disorganized demi-real world, and at the same time work for the establishment of unity. Here is what Baha'u'llah said about the state of the world as he predicted it. This is Baha'u'llah as quoted by Shoghi Effendi. If ye pay no heed, he, Baha'u'llah, thus warned the kings of the earth, unto the counsels which we have revealed in this tablet, divine chastisement will assail you from every direction. On that day ye shall recognize your own impotence. And again, though aware of most of our afflictions, ye nevertheless have failed to stay the hands of the aggressor. And furthermore, this arraignment, we will be patient. as we have been patient in that which hath befallen us at your hands, O concourse of kings. Condemning specifically the world's ecclesiastical leaders, he has written, the source and origin of tyranny hath been the divines. God verily is clear of them, and we too are clear of them. When we observed carefully, he openly affirms, we discovered that our enemies are for the most part the divines. O concourse of the divines, he thus addresses them. Ye shall not henceforth behold yourselves possessed of any power, inasmuch as we have seized it from you. And in fact, Baha'u'llah also said that from two ranks power hath been seized, kings and ecclesiastics. In other words, both political and religious leaders. And I think we're seeing that right now. Governments, religious leaders are trying to do what they can to deal with this kind of social disorganization. Churches are experiencing it, as we've seen in the news, tremendous disorganization, and are trying to do the best to overcome it. But without the guidance of the divine physician, Baha'u'llah, it's simply not going to work. In 1912, Abdu'l-Baha, when he was in the Western world, including in the United States and Canada, repeatedly emphasized the importance of racial unity. Now, no party holds a monopoly on race baiting. Both Democrats and Republicans in the United States and other parties throughout the world have engaged in it. But nonetheless, we're seeing a tremendous increase in the world of this process of race baiting, especially in the United States, where politicians, given the long history of slavery and the reservation system, should know better than to use that as a kind of policy measure or tactic. I, for one, used to self-identify as a white American. I can now confidently, very confidently assert that I no longer place myself under that very pernicious and odious category. To me, in the United States, race is synonymous with white class dominance. The category African American, in my view, should always have been another ethnicity, not a subordinated caste or race. So, to reject whiteness, from my perspective, is the same as repudiating the ideology of racism, which is what racism is, an ideology, a shared belief system. In other words, racism, or, to use a fancier term, white exceptionalism, is a continuation of African American enslavement. Therefore, if someone asks me, what is your race? My current response would be either that I have none, which would be my preferred response, or if I am very strongly pressed, that I am racially or ethnically an indigenous Ashkenazi Jew. To me, saying that I'm a member of the human race, while obviously true, is also a bit of a cliche. My concern is the fact that historically, my ancestors, when we came to the United States, were so willing to embrace the social construction of whiteness. I think that was very unfortunate. I'm not criticizing them. They did it in a time when there really was little alternative. But I think that now, in the 21st century, it is appropriate not only for people of Jewish ancestry, but people of any ancestry in the United States to simply abandon the concept of race and of whiteness, while honoring African Americans as an oppressed race. But for white people to identify with race, to call themselves members of a race, is, I think, extraordinarily destructive. Here, for example, is a statement which was made by former Minnesota governor and professional wrestler and Navy SEAL Jesse Ventura. Of course, that was actually his stage name, but he's known as Jesse Ventura. This is what he said, and I think it's pretty ironic for a white person, so-called, to say this. We are slaves to your corporations. For a white person to say that he is a slave is, to me, really, really odd. I just don't, I have to admit, I simply don't understand it. In early 2012, one ultimately successful U.S. presidential contender referred to President Obama as a food stamp president. Strangely enough, this man also has a Ph.D. in history, which makes it extraordinarily ironic. This is a quotation from what Newt Gingrich said on January 6th of 2012. The fact is, if I become your nominee of the Republican Party, we will make the key test very simple. Food stamps versus paychecks. Barack Obama is the best food stamp president in American history. More people are on food stamps today because of Obama's policies than ever in history. I would like to be the best paycheck president in American history. Well, the guy was not successful. Of course, President Barack Obama was reelected. What I actually recommend to people is that white people consider celebrating Kwanzaa. Of course, Kwanzaa is a recent holiday which was invented by an African fellow, and but I think that for white people, that would be a good alternative to the current celebrations during that time of year, especially for Baha'is. Baha'is don't celebrate among themselves Christmas or Hanukkah, but Kwanzaa is not a religious holiday, and non-African Americans are welcome to participate in Kwanzaa. For non-African Americans, the traditional greeting is joyous Kwanzaa, and I think that's a good thing to do, to celebrate Kwanzaa. So, what is happening now? Well, as Baha'u'llah said, the world's equilibrium hath been upset through the vibrating influence of this most great, this new world order. Mankind's ordered life hath been revolutionized through the agency of this unique, this wondrous system, the like of which mortal eyes have never witnessed. That is from his most holy book, the Kitab-i-Aqdas. We are seeing that right now, I think. The entire equilibrium of the world, in all respects, whether geographically, with the increase in earthquakes, in animal deaths, the unusual weather that we've been experiencing, consequence of our own treatment of our planet, with the earthquakes, tornadoes, hurricanes. I mean, just so many natural disasters apparently speeding up. Just the other day, a meteor landed in near the Ural Mountains in Russia, causing tremendous devastation. On the same day as an asteroid went past Earth, inside the orbital path of the satellites, very, very close to the Earth. We're seeing tremendous change. Literally, I think, the equilibrium of the world is being upset. It's not just a figurative or spiritual change. I think it's literal, and all of these things are happening right now as, I think, reminders to us that we have been and that we are on the wrong path. So what I'd like to do now is to move into a bit of a speculation, and I admit that that's what it is. It's only speculation. I'm not a prophet, obviously, God forbid. Not even a seer. I'm not a futurist. Futurism is a widely discredited field. But I'm willing to do this because I think it's important. To be honest, I think that there is a really, really strong chance I'm wrong. But nonetheless, because my gut tells me that it's important for me to mention this, I will. I'll read you what I wrote at the beginning of this portion of the book. I will now go way out on a limb to detail certain speculations on possible scenarios of events which, if my hunches are correct, may begin to play out globally by the end of 2013, this year. Needless to say, any or all of the details I shall provide might be wrong. The time frame could also be inaccurate. I am clearly not a seer, and I have no training in the widely disputed field of futurism. On the other hand, both seers and futurists have made many mistakes. The sources of my conjectures on the great unraveling include the predictions of others, my own intuitions, and a dream I had in 2012. Truthfully, I hope and pray that I am wrong. Well, let me caution first that in the majority of these cases, with the exception of two, the sources of the information come from psychic practices. Psychic practices are discouraged in the Baha'i teachings. They're considered to be unreliable. And so Baha'is do not rely upon psychic practices, and we are very strongly encouraged not to practice them. Abdu'l-Baha said that to meddle with psychic practices actually interferes with the progress of the soul in the next world. My own view is that this kind of psychic field or aura that we all have, or ghost, whatever you want to call it, orb that we all have, that this is a mechanism of communication and interaction, perhaps even interaction with this world, that souls in the world beyond have, and that by playing around with it here, but basically kind of walking around in the dark with a bunch of nails on the ground, that we're placing a lot of placing ourselves into a very precarious situation where we may end up really harming ourselves and our positions in the next world. So I certainly, by quoting these things, I do not mean to condone the practice of psychic phenomena, the paranormal, or parapsychology. Nevertheless, I'll mention a few things. First, a number of psychics have predicted tremendous earth changes for the year 2013. By earth changes, birds falling out of the sky, fish washing up on shore. One particular individual, talked about the birds that were found in Beebe, Arkansas. Their insides, she said, were liquefied. Emory University Associate Professor of Political Science, Courtney Brown, through his own personal activity in something called remote viewing, which is basically systematic clairvoyance, has predicted various events to occur before June 1st of 2013. I don't know if it'll be before June 1st. Impacts from meteors, tsunamis, volcanoes, extensive flooding on coastal areas, excessive solar radiation, something which is also predicted by another remote viewer named Major Ed Dames, storms and other severe weather. He predicted that as a result of that, there will be a lot of self-relocation on a massive scale from coastal areas, basically refugees. Governments will break down. There won't be any available rescue operations. The entire food supply system will disintegrate. No vehicular transport will exist. And a lot of buildings near coasts will also be gone. And now he gives a few speculations as to why he thinks that these predictions that were made by his team might be accurate. For example, he says that there is digging. I'll read you what he wrote. Digging is everywhere. The U.S. has no nuclear enemies, yet it is digging huge underground facilities in inhospitable regions, difficult for the masses to reach. And he asks the question, why? Well, there are these underground shelters that people are building, particularly the military, not only in the United States, but in other countries such as China and Russia. And he speculates that the reason why there is such a rush to build these deep underground bases or shelters is because of an anticipation of these massive earth changes that may occur, he feels, before June 1st of this year. Similarly, another individual who goes by the name of Cliff High is the originator of the WebBot project, which is at the site halfpasthuman.com, was influenced by Courtney Brown's work, and he talks about similar kinds of things happening, and he also has argued or speculated that these events will most likely happen before June 1st of this year. An amateur geologist has speculated that it's possible that there will be tremendous earth changes sometime around the middle of March. So, regardless, nobody knows exactly what is going to happen. But some people have speculated. And I think, unfortunately, those speculations have often been misinterpreted. But I will read to you, this is a transcript that I retrieved, written by, actually spoken by, a radio talk show personality named John Moore, who also uses the name J.R. Moore. This is what he said. This information is coming from people in the U.S. Department of Homeland Security, FEMA, which is the Federal Emergency Management Agency, and the U.S. military, that there will be martial law in this country, the U.S., between now, which was December 28th, 2012, and Memorial Day, which is May 27th, 2013. Two of the three sources are pointing specifically toward March as being the most likely month. In addition, one of these people, a military officer, was at a briefing. They were told in very general terms about what they'd be told to do. And they further told them that if they did not follow orders, that their immediate families would be murdered. The military officer himself is considering committing suicide as a result. One last thing I have. 150,000 Palestinians have been cleared to be brought to this country, the U.S. These are military-aged men, 18 to 40 years old, which we believe to have had at least some rudimentary military training, and will probably get more once they get here. And that's what I got. And other people have made similar kinds of speculations. Now, again, I think that all of these things relate to earth changes. In the wake of devastation, there will be anarchy, inevitably, I think. And perhaps under certain circumstances, people in the military have to be willing to shoot on citizens. I think that's what they are anticipating. Now, I could be wrong, but that is my interpretation of the data. So I see most of this as relating to earth changes, geological disasters. There may also be war, especially in the wake of the earth changes. Some countries may use these earth changes as opportunities to engage in acts of war, to seize whatever resources they possibly can seize. So that's a possibility as well. Now, I realize this has been a rather negative broadcast, and I apologize for that. Bear in mind, again, I'm not a psychic, certainly, or a seer, or a futurist. I'm simply providing my own intuitions, and I realize that there is a very good chance that I am wrong. Until next time, this is Dr. Mark Foster. Have a good one.